Mr. Donald Trump was in Korea this week for the first state visit by a U.S. president in 25 years. His third bilateral summit with President Moon Jae-in reaffirmed the strong military and political partnership between Seoul and Washington. And many say Trump's itinerary from Camp Humphreys to the National Cemetery was a testament to that as well. Amid mounting concerns over Pyongyang's provocations, however, is the alliance as solid as it appears to be? On this week's Upfront, we assess the Korea-U.S. Alliance, where it is now and where it's headed.
U.S. President Donald Trump has made his first state visit to South Korea. Following his visit to a U.S. military base in Pyeongtaek, Trump sat down with President Moon Jae-in for a one-on-one meeting, the third of its kind since the two leaders took office. They exchanged views on ways to strengthen the ROK-US Alliance and joint efforts to address North Korea's nuclear issue.
트럼프 대통령과 저는 오늘 한미동맹의 미래와 대한민국의 기여를 상징적으로 보여주는 평택 기지를 함께 방문했습니다. 공동의 목표를 향해 함께 땀 흘리는 양국 장병들을 격려하며 우리 두 정상은 한미동맹의 뜨거운 우정을 느꼈습니다.
The Republic of Korea is more than a long-standing ally of the United States. We are partners and friends who have fought side by side in a war and really worked very hard and prospered toward a great and lasting peace. I feel confident that we'll be able to reach a free, fair, and reciprocal trade deal as we renegotiate our current 5-year-old trade document.
On the second day, the U.S. leader spoke at South Korea's National Assembly, delivering the only parliamentary address in his Asia tour. As Trump reiterated the importance of the steadfast alliance between the two countries and coordinated measures by the international community to pressure North Korea, he became the 7th U.S. president to address the South Korean parliament and the first in 24 years.
The world cannot tolerate the menace of a rogue regime that threatens with nuclear devastation. All responsible nations must join forces to isolate the brutal regime of North Korea, to deny it, and any form of it, you cannot support, you cannot supply, you cannot accept.
President Moon has repeatedly voiced his commitment to pursuing self-reliant defense based on the firm ROK-US Alliance.
우리가 전시작전권을 가져야 북한이 우리를 더 두려워하고 국민은 군을 더 신뢰하게 될 것입니다.
In line with President Moon's push for an early operational control transfer from Washington to Seoul, the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States agreed to speed up a condition-based operational control transition at last month's Security Consultative Meeting. But the Korean public is sharply divided over the operational control transfer. Some are in favor of the idea, saying it will lead to self-reliant defense, while others remain skeptical about an early transfer given the rapidly changing security dynamics on the peninsula.
전환해야 돼요. 우리는 우리가 지켜야지.
우리가 전작권을 가져와야 북한이 우리를 두려워하고 아마 대화하려 하지 않을까요?
원활히 수행하기 위해서는 한국군이 전작권을 갖는 게 당연하죠.
점차적으로 자주방위를 하는 것이 우리나라 국민한테도 좀 더 자존심도 강해질 수 있고 좀 더 국가적인 경쟁도 높아지는 방향이 아닌가 하는 생각을 듭니다. 아직까지는 조금은 시기상조가 아닌가 생각도 들거든요.
저는 아직 때가 아니라고 생각합니다.
Amid the growing uncertainty surrounding the Korean peninsula, the alliance between Seoul and Washington is taking on renewed importance. On this week's Upfront, we assess where the alliance is headed under President Moon's leadership and whether President Trump's visit could help further cement the alliance.
For today's discussion, we are joined by two experts. Oh Joon, former Korean ambassador to the UN, currently a professor in the Graduate Institute of Peace Studies at Sogang University. And Kim Jae-chun, professor in the Graduate School of International Studies at Sogang University. Welcome. Seoul went to great lengths to receive President Trump. Not surprising, naturally, considering the nature as well as the timing of the visit. What do you think the Moon administration hoped to get out of all of this, and do you think it got it?
I think it went very well. Basically, there were three key elements. His visit to the U.S. troops here, U.S. camp here, and also his meeting with President Moon and dinner, and then his speech at National Assembly. Right. So I think for the Moon government in Korea, I think they should be quite satisfied with the visit. The President Trump's visit delivered the messages both the United States and the Republic of Korea wanted to convey. I think in that sense it was generally a good visit.
Yeah, I think there were some key words that the Seoul government might have been afraid to hear, things like military option or scrapping the FTA, at least those words.
Yeah, I think it is very important to note that he didn't really use warlike rhetoric because many South Koreans here were worrying about the possibility of the U.S. launching military options against North Korea.
Bypassing Seoul along
yes,
the way,
and he promised that there's not going to be any skipping of South Korea. And he also promised that he would support Moon Jae-in government's plan to establish enduring peace here on the Korean Peninsula, abolish the weight limit on South Korea's missile warheads. So a lot of things I think the Moon government has elicited and has pretty much got everything it wanted. And also on trade front, I think it is important to note that Trump didn't really threaten to scrap the FTA deal, although he demanded that the deficit should be reduced and the trade relations should be improved. But he didn't really threaten the way he did while he was in the United States. I think Moon Jae-in government has done a lot of groundwork here. Did really put in good faith efforts to prepare for this event.
I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that President Trump seemed more interested in promoting U.S. economic interests than anything else. What did you think?
Well, the White House already made clear that the whole Asia tour this time has important issues like North Korea and trade. So they made clear that that President Trump is very much keen on promoting U.S. position, U.S. interest in terms of its trade with key countries in Asia, with most of which U.S. have trade deficit.
So it was a natural
Natural, it was quite understandable.
Yeah.
Before he took into the office, during his campaign period, he said several times that he would elicit economic concession by using security assurances as a sort of a bargaining chip. But I think it is worth noting that he didn't really use the alliance security partnership or security guarantees as bargaining chip to elicit concessions on the trade issues. But that said, I think more of a priority to President Trump has been trade issues rather than North Korean issue, although he didn't really threaten, as I said before, to scrap FTA deal, but he made it very sure that trade relations should be improved. And I think Moon Jae-in government responded to this very smoothly. I think Moon Jae-in government preemptively said that, President Moon preemptively said that, well, we will be working on, we'll be expediting negotiation, discussion process, and President Trump basically said yes to that.
I guess President Trump had to show his supporters back home that he's doing his job. He kept mentioning creating American jobs and selling American weapons to Asia, right?
Yeah, during the press conference here in Seoul, he mentioned that the Republic of Korea will purchase billions of dollars of equipment. He said equipment, probably weapons, from the United States.
An FTA obviously is a deal that was signed by the two countries, but as the Trump administration demanded renegotiation, the Korean government conceded and agreed to talk about it. Where do you think the two countries can reach a common ground?
Well, right now they already started to talk, and they are kind of both countries, both representatives are going back to their countries to take necessary domestic procedure to start negotiation. And I think the bottom line is that scrapping this hard-won agreement is not a good idea for either of the two countries. So we need to save it. But what the United States is worried about is the actual outcome in terms of trade. So the fact that, during President Trump's visit this time, there was talk about South Korea purchasing more, defense items from America. I think that should help, because all these defense equipments are very expensive, and that should help kind of, cutting down the deficit on the part of the U.S. And actually, the deficit from the perspective of the U.S. Is mostly with China.
Well, it has deficits with China, Japan, and Korea.
But the deficit with South Korea is only about 1/10 of the total deficit with China. So I think if they work with these countries as well, then the overall situation in terms of trade balance for America will improve. Then I think probably the talks on or renegotiation on ROK-US FTA will also might be able to find a mutually acceptable solution.
I want to ask Professor Kim about your opinion on defense cost sharing. The two leaders during their press conference were rather vague about defense cost sharing, whether Korea will have to shoulder more of the burden.
Because it's a politically sensitive issue in South Korea, and we believe that we are paying already enough for stationing U.S. FK here on South Korean soil and then maintaining alliance. But as with FTA, I think it is more valid strategy to make a concession, a bit of concession right away. I mean, it's not just about fact-finding. Fact is there, but it's domestic political reasons why Trump has become so insistent on these issues. So cost sharing, as long as we can augment our own independent defense capability that is required for the transfer of OPCON to better deal with North Korean threats, I think it is okay for us to pay more, but more of a challenge that would come from the Trump administration is true meaning of role sharing, as I said before. I think Trump will be asking us to play more of a role, more of a shoulder, more of a burden in terms of dealing with China. So I think it's very important for South Korea to figure out what will be our role from the perspective of Mr. Trump to make the U.S. great again. What will be our role in Trump's Asian policy and China policy?
One issue closely tied to it is the transfer of wartime operational control, which President Moon has consistently called for since his campaigning days. Just ahead of Trump's visit, the defense chiefs of the two countries agreed to develop a plan for a speedy, conditions-based OPCON transfer. Where do you stand on the issue of OPCON transfer?
Well, when it comes to the issue of OPCON transfer, if we see this issue from a perspective, it's already a kind of foregone conclusion that one day operational control will be transferred to South Korean military. But the issue is just timing, in my opinion. When is it going to take place? And it has a lot to do with the current, security situation caused by the North Korean nuclear program. And so it's very hard to tell. Some people talk about 2020 for the target year. The way I see it, the North Korea nuclear issue will probably be resolved, not into distant future. But we cannot, say for sure when that's going to happen. So in a way, these two issues, the way I see it, these two issues are tied with each other. So that's how I.
So the timing of the transfer would be sometime after the North Korean nuclear crisis is resolved.
If not totally resolved, it should be
diluted, okay.
addressed.
Oh. Do you think, though, that a transfer will strengthen or undermine?
I think it's not going to affect the alliance itself too much. This OPCON arrangement from the beginning is a little unique, coming from the background to starting with Korean War and has a lot to do with the history of South Korea-U.S. military alliance cooperation. So it's quite unique. You cannot have a kind of fit for all, or one size fit for all answer for this, because this is very unique situation.
Yeah.
It is very important to remember that in 2014, two countries agreed that we'll have to postpone the transfer of OPCON until certain conditions are met. As Ambassador Oh just mentioned, two countries went great length to talk about these three conditions. There are three conditions, and first, South Korea should have the capability to lead the combined forces defense. That's one condition. Second, South Korea should have the core capability to fend off North Korea nuclear threats and missiles threats as well. And third, the security environment surrounding the Korean Peninsula and also in the region should improve dramatically. And think about it, those three conditions are not met at this stage. And I think the Moon Jae-in government's position has been that we'll have to expedite the process to have a stronger defense capability. But I think, in my personal opinion, it's got to be the other way around. We got to have that capability first. We got to meet that condition before the transfer of OPCON. So that is my take. Although eventually we'll have to transfer the OPCON to South Korea, but conditions should be met, and that is the agreement between the two countries.
President Moon Jae-in has stepped back a little. During his campaign, he said he wants to bring the transfer back during his tenure. Yeah. Now he says maybe not during his tenure, but as
still is trying to expedite the process.
Do you think then a transfer will affect the Korea-U.S. alliance in any way?
I mean, if the conditions are met, I mean, if we emphasize the importance of how, fast we'll have to get it back, then it can do a certain damage to our relations with, because Americans emphasizing the conditions, and if we talking about the timing, I mean, how fast we'll have to do it, then it can do a certain damage to our relations.
When President Moon came into office, there were concerns that the ROK-US Alliance could become strained under the liberal Moon administration. Do you see that happening now or any time in the near future?
I don't see that happening now, not least because we are faced with this very serious security situation. This is probably the most serious one we have faced during the last several decades after the Korean War. So under the circumstances, I think alliance, U.S.-ROK Alliance is very important. And no matter how liberal a South Korean government is, I think there is no other option. There is no alternative to strengthening the alliance at this time.
So regardless of the differences in political inclinations, this one big issue, the security threat, is keeping the alliance strong,
That's right.
in your opinion. What do you think?
Well, I think The alliance relations is in much better shape than expected. As you said, President Moon Jae-in is a liberal politician, and during campaign period, he said that South Korea should be able to say no to the United States, and if elected, he might visit North Korea first before the United States. I mean, I'm not saying that he's an anti-Americanist or anything like that, but it is certain to me that he was looking for independent strategic space. I mean, independent of the U.S. I mean, in terms of making regions policy and also North Korean policy. But then what happened? His peace gesture toward North Korea fell on deaf ears. Instead, North Koreans, tested all sorts of missiles and hydrogen bombs. So now he's thinking that, there's no other way around here. There's no option but to rely more on the alliance to better deal with the North Korean threats. And Trump as well. I mean, this is a person who said that, well, he might scrap the alliance. He might withdraw USFK if South Korea doesn't pay 100% for the alliance. But, he found out that the North Koreans are working on ICBM, with which they can deliver warheads, nuclear warheads to mainland. Now, he believes that this is a direct threat to the United States. So he's saying that, well, the alliance should be the primary mechanism with which the U.S. will defend the United States, as well as South Korea. Although it may sound a little bit ironical, the escalation of the threat posed by North Korea has sort of drawn two administrations together. It has become the alliance has become a lot more valid to Moon Jae-in government as well as to the Trump administration.
Yeah, it certainly seems to have gotten stronger over the last couple of months.
In other words, this is time for unity, not for division for allies like us.
And also that convergence of threat perception is the key in order for alliance partnership to be valid.
Yeah, there was a time when we were worried that Korea was talking about peace and dialogue, whereas the U.S. was talking about fire and fury. But Trump's visit this time around, I think, has been able to alleviate some of those fears. One final question before we wrap up. Between Pyongyang's continuous provocations and growing trade pressure from Washington, how do you think the Korea-U.S. partnership should develop?
Well, I think those two issues are separate from each other. We deal with economic issues with the United States as they are, and security issue as it is. So I think both governments have that understanding, and even though, from time to time, President Trump raises these economic issues, trade issues, not only with us, but with other countries in Asia and other parts of the world. I don't think he's mixing them up. The security issues are important on their own, and for that we need very strong U.S.-ROK Alliance, which we have.
U.S. is worrying that Moon Jae-in government might be leaning toward appeasement, dialogues without meeting certain conditions, whereas the Moon government here is worrying that Trump administration might be using military options. So I think it is important for both countries to work out these nuance differences, otherwise this is going to strain the alliance relationship. And second, I'd like to emphasize our position with regard to trilateral security cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, because the American stance is that they like to improve deepen the security cooperation between the three countries. And my impression is that the Moon government is still harboring qualms about strengthening the trilateral security cooperation for fear of angering China. Yeah, so I think China issue can complicate the alliance relationship. I think it is very important for both countries to come to an agreement as to the nature of the trilateral cooperation and also South Korea's role in American policy toward China.
Yes, Presidents Moon and Trump reaffirmed the strong Seoul-Washington alliance, but North Korea and upcoming FTA renegotiation are sure to be a test of whether that relationship can make the next leap forward. Well, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. Upfront will be back next week. Thanks for watching.